Hello, my name is Jane Ramsire Miller, and I am the Artistic Director for GALA Choruses and also the Artistic Director for One Voice Mixed Chorus, LGBT and Straight Allies Chorus in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Hi, I'm Steve Milloy. I am also a board member of GALA Choruses and the Artistic Director of the Cincinnati Men's Chorus.
So we are so excited to share this incredible composition and commission that honors the life of Bayard Rustin. So I first heard about Bayard in the early 90s, and I was absolutely blown away that here was this Quaker black man, singer, activist, and the organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, and I had never heard of him. I couldn't believe it, and it was because he was gay. So I started reading up on this guy. And then fast forward to 2014, Steve Milloy and I are sitting at a GALA symposium in Cleveland and having lunch, and Steve says,
"Hey, Jane, have you heard of Bayard Rustin?" And all of us said, yes. It was just one of those moments of kinship and recognition, and we started talking about it. And, you know, I was just surprised myself. I found out about Bayard Rustin through this wonderful documentary called Brother Outsider that was showing at the St. Louis Gay and Lesbian Film Festival back in the late 90s, I would say. And I was surprised that I had never heard of this guy and how crucial and important he was to Dr. Martin Luther King, how he had influenced King with Gandhiism and nonviolent resistance. And, it's because of Bayard that King did those things. And we never heard about him because, as you said, he was gay and openly gay.
So Steve said, "Hey, I want to write this piece," and I said yes. He was looking for a choir to perform it, and I was just so excited. And I said, "We're going to make this happen." So Steve, talk about why was it especially important for you to write this piece about Bayard Rustin?
Well, Jane, you know, I have been involved in the GALA Choruses movement now for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And during that time, I had sung pieces about Matthew Shepard. I had sung pieces about Harvey Milk. And I was wondering, when am I going to sing a piece about a person who looks like me? And nobody seemed to be commissioning that piece or wanting that work. And so it seemed that if I'm going to sing about somebody who looks like me, I'm going to have to find a way to write it.
So it took us about 2.5 years to work on this piece. And I think one of the hardest parts was figuring out which parts of Bayard Rustin's amazing life that we weren't going to include. We included several librettists. The primary writer was Vanessa German, who is a visual artist and spoken word artist from Pittsburgh. And then Steve, talk about the other librettists you worked with.
Norman Welch, who's actually an old high school friend of mine who really specializes in writing librettos for opera. And Bruce Preston, who is a good friend of mine, also on the board of the Cincinnati Men's Chorus here. And we had written pieces together before. And he just really has an eye and a scope for theater and telling stories. And then my husband, David Major, actually took some time and wrote some lyrics and wrote a rap, which you're not going to hear in this performance, I'm sorry to say.
So what you're going to hear tonight is the 2017 premiere of this piece at the Ordway Concert Hall in St. Paul. Our guest artists are really well-known Twin Cities artists T. Michael Rambo and Amy K. Bryant. They are our storytellers for the piece. One Voice also performed this piece with youth from Central High School. So you'll see them mixed in with the choir, and Steve was our conductor for the premiere, which is super exciting. It was commissioned by 5 different GALA choirs, so we'll list them here so you can see all of the choirs that have performed this particular piece. If you'd like to download a program that gives you a little bit of the history on this piece and a list of the songs and some of the information about the performers, you can find that link on the GALA website. And now, enjoy Bayard Rustin, The Man Behind the Dream, composed by Steve Milloy.
And produced by Jane Ramsire Miller.
So I learned about Bayard Rustin 20 years ago, and I couldn't believe I had never heard of this man, this incredible Renaissance man, an athlete, a poet, an activist. So when Steve Milloy and I were having lunch in Cincinnati 2 years ago, and he mentioned wanting to write an oratorio on the life of Bayard Rustin, I said yes, even before he finished the sentence, and agreed that we would premiere it. And what an honor it has been for us. Steve's music and The Man Behind the Dream has kept my hope alive this fall. We've been working 2 years on this project, and it's incredible to see it come to fruition. Vanessa German's words have both inspired me and brought me to tears. May this work inspire not only us to dream of a more inclusive and welcoming world, but to shape those dreams into steady action. Please welcome with one voice the Central Mixed Voices, guest artist T. Michael Rambo, Amy K. Bryant, and the composer Steve Milloy.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day. This Monday, January 16th, 2017, When Congress finally passed the King Holiday Bill in 1983, Coretta Scott King informed America,
"This is not a black holiday. It is a people's holiday. It is our holiday, and we have all come together to celebrate in the living legacy of sacrifice, courage, and humanity that was Dr. King's enduring song. A song that we all know so well. We shall overcome."
You may think that Dr. King's song was a solo song. Selma and Marches, that fatal shot in April in Memphis, Tennessee. I have a dream. I have a dream.
Or perhaps you see Dr. King's song as a kind of barbershop quartet of social justice, featuring singers like A. Philip Randolph, Ralph J. Abernathy, John Lewis, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I have a dream.
But what do you know about Bayard Rustin?
Here in a landscape of iPhone dreamers, Wikipedia, and difficult to grasp human lessons that keep marching their way around again and again, what do you know about the man behind the dream?
Bayard Rustin was born to change the world. I don't mean to be hyperbolic. I just come to you with the truth that Rustin was born in the year of our Lord, 1912. William Howard Taft was president. The Memphis Blues was playing on the old Victrola. The Titanic sank. Fenway Park opened in Boston.
And 62 African Americans were lynched. It was a different America, people, a different world. And Bayard Rustin was born, a black boy in a world that didn't want to look him in the eye. Bone to the breeze.
Black boy born, tar and cotton beneath his feet. Black boy born, don't dare to reach to dream.
Curl your spine and turn your cheek. Bayard, black boy, don't you dare to leave. Bayard was born with the eyes of a dreamer. He had one foot planted firmly in the separate but equal present. But he was standing on tiptoe, reaching into a future where no boy or nobody would have to wither of spirit and mind under the oppressive fist of ignorance and hate.
Bayard Rustin was raised by his grandmother, Julia, a devout Quaker. She was a free-born African-American woman. She didn't take nothing from nobody. She was what kids today would call a bad mother for peace and justice.
As a Quaker and an early member of the NAACP, Julia Rustin was a beacon in the small black community of Westchester, Pennsylvania.
The Rustin dining room walls rang with the voices and the stories of visiting heroic leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois,
Souls of Black Folk,
Mary McLeod
Bethune-Cookman College,
and the poet and activist James Weldon Johnson.
Lift every voice and sing.
Their voices fueled Bayard's dreams. Would you please join us and stand for the singing of the Negro National Anthem? Impressed upon Bayard the strength and courage of presence. She helped him to see that even through adversity and conflict, the power of remaining calm.
One just doesn't lose one's temper. Grandmother Julia taught him that a peaceful presence was a more powerful weapon against hate than an entire army of cannons and guns.
Bayard learned. He learned to treat all people with respect, to hear every side of a controversy, and to put oneself at the service of others in the name of love.
Beautiful boy, sing your beautiful song, always looking ahead with your back so long, with an open heart and a spirit strong. What can break you when you're where you belong? Where you belong, in a place of love and grace. May no hand in hate come to erase. Where you belong, in a place with your back so long, with an open heart and a spirit strong. Nothing can break you if you live your truth, your song.
It was Grandmother Julia who raised Bayard with the fundamental understanding that we all belong to a single human family and that all members of this family are equal.
She taught Bayard, through the Quakers and through her own living actions, that even though the hate and cruelty of racism would seek to break and brutalize his humanity with fists and nooses against his body and his mind, it would do him no good to go about meeting violence with violence.
Blessed are the ones of peace, whose hearts and hopes are one, whose mind desires to serve and please through all their actions run. God's goodness and unchanged from day to day. I'll drop my burden at God's feet and bear a song away.
But Quakers were not timid people. No, they were peaceful fighters, stalwart humans who put their bodies to use in the fight against hate and brutality.
Quakers were important links to the Underground Railroad. They lived their faith through action.
So even though young Bayard had a way with words and won all of his high school oratory awards, he was never just talk. Bayard lived his faith. It was in his hands and in his feet and in his heart. It was Bayard's indefatigable faith that we are one human family that fueled one of his first protests as a high school athlete.
At an away football game, the hotel refused to let the black players sleep or eat in the same rooms as the other players. A natural and courageous leader, offensive tackle MVP Bayard Rustin led a group of players in protest, refusing to compete in the championship game, and the hotel relented.
It was also at this young age that Bayard expressed to his grandmother his interest and attraction to other young men.
Now, homosexuality at the turn of the 20th century was a crime. In some states, it was a capital offense, punishable by imprisonment or corporal punishment. We've come a long way, friends, yes. So which makes Julia Rustin a woman ahead of her time. Because when Bayard Rustin did what we come today as calling coming out, his grandmother only remarked,
I suppose that's what you need to do. Now, Julia understood that as a young black man, Bayard would have to fight to be the kind of free that he dreamed of. He need not add the crippling internal battle of shame to impede his progress. So, Julia just went on raising Bayard in the truth that his love is the same as all love.
Only meet after dawn.
And so, armed with the beliefs and the acceptance of his loving home and family, Bayard set out as a young man to change the world.
He became an angelic troublemaker, a man of peaceful and forceful action.
Bayard moved from Westchester, Pennsylvania to New York City. His political developments took him from pacifism,
communism,
socialism,
and into the civil rights movement. He traveled over 10,000 miles through 20 states, bringing the message of love, justice, and equality
to communities and families struggling with the real, everyday pain and poverty and racism. From not being able to put a can of beans on the table to the grief and trauma of racism.
Cross burnings, church bombings, and lynchings.
The ugliness, the everyday ugliness of being made to hang your head low when you walk down the street past a white man.
And Bayard didn't hang his head low for anyone because he knew who he was. He was Julia's grandson.
Proud descendant of enslaved African people.
Child of a mighty and loving God.
He knew no reason to live in the shadows.
Not for being a black man.
Or being a gay man. Bayard recognized racism and homophobia both as forces of hate, fed by ignorance and fear, lies. He knew that he could not both love God and hate himself for being a black gay man, so he didn't.
He walked tall, and he stood proud. Bayard understood that getting black folks to internalize the hate-filled messages of racism was part of the work of the racist lie, to divide communities and eventually the self. He said,
"You can't have somebody tell you every day that you're nothing and not start to believe it."
But Bayard told them no. No, you are not ugly.
No, you are not stupid.
No, you are not powerless. He began to give form to his genius strategies of organizing, saying,
"The only weapon we have is our bodies, and we have to tuck them in places so the wheels don't turn. If the seats on the bus can't hold your mother, be a stick in the wheel. And if the seats on the bus can't be used by your father, be a stick in the wheel. Cause if the seats on the bus aren't meant for all of us, go on, be a stick in the wheel." Hear what I'm saying?
If the lathe in the factory can't be used by my auntie, I'll be a stick in the wheel. And if the lathe in the factory can't be turned by my uncle, I'll be a stick in the wheel. If the factory in town gonna turn us all down, well, I'll be a stick in the wheel. Oh, brother, stand by sitting. Oh, my sister,
In 1947, Bayard organized the first freedom rides protesting racial segregation in the South. A full 8 years before Rosa Parks made headlines, Bayard was arrested for sitting in the whites-only section of a bus and was sentenced to work on a chain gang.
I got a rainbow tied all around my shoulder. I got a rainbow tied all around my shoulder. I'm going home, Lord, I'm going home. Everywhere
In 1944, after refusing to participate in World War II, Bayard spent 28 months in prison as a conscientious objector. His lover wrote him letters in code as a woman so they would not be intercepted by prison officials.
I can breathe. I can breathe. Breathe that was so crying. I'm tired. I can breathe. I can breathe. Breathe that was so crying. I'm tired. My tears run down. Lord, my tears run down. Tears run down. Just you wait. Just you wait till
Even incarcerated and on the chain gang, Bayard moved the justice and moved the organization within the prison, documenting the torturous punishments served by the chain gang guards.
I'm gonna fight.
On Bayard's release, he drafted a 5-part series for the New York Post titled 22 Days on the Chain Gang, describing the brutal details of his imprisonment.
These words, combined with Rustin's articulate protests, led to the abolition of the chain gang in North Carolina.
Peaceful movements of protest were changing lives worldwide.
Moved by the life and work of Mahatma Gandhi, Bayard traveled to India to study the work of a global pacifist community. Even in India, he refused to hide his sexuality and loved the jewelry and dress of the people of India.
Profoundly touched by Gandhi's teaching, Bayard wove the path of nonviolent resistance to his strategies for social change and justice. It was this work that led him to meet with a young leader, Martin Luther King Jr.
King was born in 1929. Bayard was 17 years his elder, and their friendship formed a powerful bond, founded in the belief that freedom is not given, it is won.
These two men, dreamers and fighters alike, found their individual strengths complemented. Rustin taught King the principles of nonviolent direct action and worked to bring King to national prominence. Together,
they brought a fierce urgency to a moment and a movement that had been rising and pressing
against the walls of Jim Crow and hate,
to a place of thunder and collective action that could not and would not be denied.
Don't have to ride Jim Crow, no, you don't have to ride Jim Crow. On June the 3rd, the High Court said, when you're riding the state, Jim Crow is dead. You don't have to ride Jim Crow. When you get on the boat, when you get on the get on the bus at any place, 'cause Irene Morgan won her case. You don't have to ride Jim Crow. You can't sit anywhere. You can't sit anywhere. Sit anywhere. Don't make no fuss. You don't rub your clothes. It's just you don't have to ride Jim Crow. And if the driver man says move, and if the driver man says move, if the driver says move, sit down polite but sit there tight, 'cause you're in the right. You don't have to ride Jim Crow. You don't have to ride that Jim Crow line. You don't have to ride that Jim Crow line. Oh, white line, you face arrest and ACP will make that test. You don't have to ride Jim Crow. And someday we'll all be free and last. Yes, someday we'll all be free and last. When united action turns the tide and black and white sit side by side. Yes, someday we'll all be free. We'll be free.
On January 6th, 1959, Mildred Loving and Richard Perry Loving were sentenced to 1 year in prison for the felony crime of marriage between people classified as white and people classified as colored.
it was a punishable crime for a white man to marry a black woman, but it was not a punishable crime for that same white man to lynch and hang the black woman's brother.
In January of 1953, California police arrested and prosecuted Bayard Rustin for sodomy, or a crime against the order of nature.
A charge which Rustin denied.
He was arrested. The arrest was not only a threat to his physical body, but a threat to the very spirit of his heart, the place where his dreams got their marching orders.
He was jailed for 60 days. And could he have been more careful? Yes. But could he have been less black and less gay? No. And he wouldn't have wanted to.
Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh,
detractors. Detractors, both black and white, came after Bayard Rustin, armed with the fear-tipped spears of homophobia. Lies that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bayard Rustin were lovers were maliciously concocted by Representative Adam Clayton Powell Jr. for his own political gain.
When Dr. King and Rustin planned a march outside the DNC in Los Angeles, Powell warned King that if he didn't distance himself from Rustin, he would go to the press with the lie that Martin and Bayard were lovers.
This threat pushed Rustin from the movement that he put his life and breath on the line for. With pressure from the movement, Rustin resigned from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization that King and Rustin founded.
For years, he stayed underneath the shadows, forced to hide for the first time in his life. The most brilliant strategic mind of the civil rights movement pushed out of the very movement he helped create.
He was a gay man, unapologetically, and he was shunned and silenced for his loving.
I met my brother the other day, and I gave him my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned, he scandalized my name. Call that a brother, call that a brother, call that a brother. He scandalized my name. I met my sister the other day, and I gave her my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned, she scandalized my name. Call that a sister, call that a sister, call that a sister. She scandalized my name. I met with Martin the other day, and I gave him my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned, he shouted for his destiny, he shouted for his destiny. So I was call that a preacher, call that a preacher, call that a preacher. Don't
When they lied on him, he just dreamed harder. They caught him in a loving, but they could not take his love. Beautiful boy, sing your beautiful song. What can break you if you live your truth, your song? August 28th, 1963.
August 28, 1963.
It was time.
Some would say it was past time. The 1963 March on Washington came with the momentum of black, brown, yellow, red, white folks both standing up and sitting down across the nation.
From the Montgomery bus boycott to sit-ins,
Demonstrations at lunch counters, shopping centers, and on to the Freedom Rides.
the growing thunder of a marginalized and oppressed citizenry had come together at a mass demonstration in Washington, D.C., the seat of this nation's political power. And a change was going to come.
People would have to come together as one voice.
But they needed an organizer,
An angelic troublemaker.
a visionary.
And there was no one else.
who could do what Bayard did. Leaders in the movement knew it and eventually agreed that Bayard Rustin should be brought back as lead organizer.
And organize he did in 8 weeks.
The busiest 8 weeks of Bayard Rustin's life.
It is estimated that 250,000 people showed up at the March on Washington, vastly exceeding expectations, extensively, dramatically, and most importantly, peacefully. How did they do that?
It was Bayard. Bayard's brilliant political and organizational strategy. Bayard's hyperactive, non-stop personality. It was Bayard.
With Julia's voice in his head, in his heart, and in 8 weeks,
without a cell phone or email,
Bayard built an organization out of nothing. He built an alliance of leaders from 27 cities,
2,000 buses,
30 freedom trains,
21 charter trains, and 10 chartered airlines,
uncounted cars.
One man roller skated 700 miles to get there.
And by 8 a.m. on the day of the march, people reported that over 100 buses an hour were streaming through the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel.
And people were scared. They didn't know if they'd be met with bomb threats or police beatings. But Bayard organized 4,000 volunteer peace marshals from New York City, and everyone had a place to sleep and food to eat and dignity.
Bayard organized more than 400 volunteers and organizations to pack bag lunches for bus riders and travelers.
One New York church packed 80,000 cheese sandwiches for hungry marchers. Hand in hand, a 1 mile march, a quarter of a million Americans
against
marching,
stifling oppression of Jim Crow, economic incarceration, and fear.
A quarter of a million Americans marching, fighting, raising the flag for an America that they believed could have the face of freedom that looked like each one of us.
They came because they wanted a new story. They had a dream, and it was time.
We shall not be moved.
Oh, we shall not be moved.
Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. Oh no, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved.
And Bayard marched with his eyes taking in the entire Washington Mall. He could see the fruit of his hard work. Freedom harvest to all. They tried to stop him. They tried to press him back. But the power of his love is its own righteous path.
of angelic troublemakers to push it along.
When you face opposition, don't you bend, don't you kneel. Just seek out the place to be the stick in the wheel.
We march on, step by step together. We march on, advancing every day. It's a movement, not a moment. One human family. When black lives truly matter, we will all be free.
1 month after the March on Washington, 4 girls gathered in the basement of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. They were changing into their choir robes when 15 sticks of dynamite planted by the Ku Klux Klan exploded, ending their young lives.
Had they lived to hear it, the sermon that Sunday they would have heard was entitled, "A Love That Forgives." To be afraid is to behave like the truth weren't true. Fighting unjust laws, bombs and hatred, the only weapon is you.
From Birmingham to Selma, some gave all and then gave more. What is your dream? What do you stand for?
We march on, advancing every day. It's a movement, not a moment. One human family. When black lives truly matter, we will all be free.
Bayard lived the truth that black lives matter. Some people don't need to be told, others do.
In 2012, Black Lives Matter was created by 3 queer black women as a call to action for black people after George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of 17-year-old Tyvon Martin.
Black Lives Matter affirms the lives of black queer and trans folks, disabled folks, black undocumented folks, folks with records, women, and all black lives along the gender spectrum.
And nobody sings this song. Black boys die. And the world goes right along. Black girls disappear. They don't sing every day. Black girls disappear. No more niggas yesterday.
Bayard stood for justice throughout his life, expanding his focus to international causes, promoting free elections in Central America and Africa, supporting refugees, protesting for LGBT rights, and bringing the AIDS crisis to the attention of the NAACP.
Bayard was always exactly who he was.
Julia's grandson,
A proud descendant of enslaved people and a loving gay child of God.
He lived this way, and he loved this way, and he moved the day this way.
In each one of his 75 years, he stood with the light of truth running a river through the house of his soul.
Bayard Rustin died in 1987, 2 months before the March on Washington for LGBTQ rights.
We press back the lies. We stand up for each other on this. We won't